Good afternoon. Thanks everybody for joining our Landowner Insights webinar. We appreciate everybody being here. I'm Dave Muth. I work in the Capital Markets Group. And today we're going to talk a little bit about digitization and show some examples on how data is impacting landowners' ability to work with and understand their assets. For folks that may not quite be familiar with Peoples Company, we're going to give a little bit of background, and I've got Emma Hamilton joining to help out with our demonstration of how the data is impacting our understanding of our farmland assets. And so she's going to help move along. Emma, if you could flip to the next slide for me quick. So Peoples Company, two main themes that we want to emphasize. First and foremost, it's a full service and also national scale farmland transaction firm. We have offices in all the major ag regions across the country, and full service meaning we're offering the full suite of services for landowners to support landowners in acquiring, managing, and understanding their farmland assets. The brokerage and auction business is large across the country, does over $1 billion a year in transactions. Currently in the land management division, managing farms in 24 states. The agricultural appraisal group, which is really critical for helping us understand market insights, market intelligence, understanding what's happening in different regions and where there's opportunities. Probably the largest ag appraisal group in the country. I spend my time in the capital markets group primarily, and we're helping capital get deployed into farmland through a number of different products. Our energy management group is working on traditional oil and gas management and transactions, as well as building out business models to support landowners in the emerging renewable space. Fairly chaotic arena, and landowners need resources to help understand how to engage that opportunity. And then we also work in crop insurance. This is primarily an intelligence tool for us in understanding how we can protect revenue across assets that are in our portfolios. Then go ahead and flip forward, Emma. So it's been a really interesting run over the past couple of decades as agriculture and farmland in particular has digitized. And we're going to walk through a little bit of what are the data resources, how do we use them, what's available for landowners to continue to learn more about their assets and understand better how to take advantage of opportunities that are out there. So we'll flip forward again quick. Here's a little bit of a snapshot. It's kind of amazing. If we think back about 20 years, to get just a basic soil map on an individual farmland asset, a lot of folks that didn't have tightly honed GIS skills would have to go down to a local FSA or NRCS office and actually have a hard copy of that soil map printed off. We saw the emergence of Surety, which created an online mapping framework where a number of data resources, including and primarily soil maps, were delivered in a commercial product. Shortly after that, USDA built out some products around that base Surgo soils data set called the Web Soil Survey. And we started to get into more remote sensing and more detailed analytical data that's available. In 2008, we could see crop history across the entire country. There were several states, particularly the Midwest and the Corn Belt, where we had that satellite imagery that would tell us that cropping history going back many years before this. But now we're starting to see these tools emerge in an even deeper way. In 2010, CoreLogic released their products, and this was a big step forward in terms of ownership, right? Being able to aggregate all of the courthouse assessor data. And now we have access to products and data layers where you can understand what the ownership dynamics are across land and other real estate resources. Surety Pro emerged with a much broader set of mapping tools in about 2012. And then Acre Value came along in about 2014. And this is where we started to stack additional analysis and analytics on top of just delivering sort of base data layers. And this created a little bit of a transition point where now we're getting into that next layer of analysis and driving deeper into insights and understanding. In the case of acre value, they were really focused on valuation algorithms that could start to sort out what was happening and provide an algorithmic outcome in terms of a value assessment. When we fast forward to today, there's a pretty robust venture capital environment out there with several companies that are building a range of tools with a certain degree of overlap, certainly in terms of a lot of the base data layers, but driving towards unique outcomes. And this has really accelerated our ability to use data and have it readily available to ultimately understand and work with farmland assets. So we'll go ahead and flip forward. There's a few key themes that we're going to talk about today on data resources that have emerged that can support landowners in understanding what their assets are and how to work with them. First and foremost, there's a base level of characterization. We can really quickly get to understanding what is the core characteristics, what are the core features, issues, etc., on an individual farmland asset. That all of those data resources are right at our fingertips. One piece that has made a lot of progress in the last couple of years in particular is being able to do pretty seamless, fast comparative market analyses. So let's pull comps together, be able to compare our asset or assets we're interested in as landowners with what the market's been doing. We'll walk through that just a little bit. And then one of the real key features that we're pretty excited about is being able to integrate data layers that let us look at some strategic opportunities, really assess what are things that I could take advantage of that ultimately push an asset forward in terms of revenue and value. Go ahead and flip forward. Now, what we're going to do to demonstrate this is actually utilize our FarmWorth platform. This is an internal platform that we've built to deliver all of these data outcomes for the farmland professionals across Peoples Company. It's a nice platform to create a demonstration for landowners generally, just in how this information can be aggregated and pulled together in a really powerful way. Our FarmWorth platform, we're really integrating data that's largely publicly available and in a lot of cases also commercially available to create that single platform where we get all of that information delivered, we can interact with it, and we can drive to outcomes that are interesting to us very, very quickly. And so we're going to go ahead and move into a couple of case studies if you want to flip forward, Emma. And Emma's going to actually hop into our FarmWorth platform. She's the resident expert in FarmWorth, and she's going to walk you through some simple examples on how this data and the availability of data can quickly move to just understanding that base character of an individual farmland asset. So Emma, go ahead and start walking folks through how quickly this can come together.
Sure, thanks, Dave. So here we are on our FarmWorth platform. We're going to use an example today in Bloomington, Illinois. And so this is some of the data that Dave was talking about here. We have some parcel information about ownership, CLUs, which is FSA data. We can overlay the soils, FEMA, and we'll go into all this, and also the counties that it's in, the U.S. counties. So we know that the farm is in McLean County, Illinois, which is a good area. And so we'll use this example farm here. And so we can turn our parcels on and quickly figure out who owns the farm, what the parcel number is, how many acres it is, and then also the people that own around the farm. And so we'll select this farm here. We've located it, whether this were a listing or a recommendation that we got in. We could quickly identify who owns it and how many acres it is. And then we can turn those off and turn our CLUs on. And so this is public data from 2008. And so we can select our tillable soils, and this will produce that super fast tillable soils map for us. And then if we want, we can turn on the FEMA layer. This is more public data. There's a kind of a waterway running through this farm, so we can double check it's not in a flood zone. And this is interactive, so we can look around that. And then after selecting those two things, we can turn on and see the section township range where that is relative to the farm. And then we can pull our quick map binder here. And that will bring up a really quick picture of what this asset looks like, which helps determine if we want to move forward or just things to look at. So we have a nice aerial map here that outlines that parcel and the tillable fields and tells us the acres of those. We can flip through different satellite imagery to see what the farm looks like at different stages of the year, different imagery. We can find the township and the county like we had before. Produces a soil map for us, and so we can see the different type of soils on the farm. Obviously, that changes and impacts the value a lot, and the aggregated PI value there at the bottom. So this one's averaging 135.4 since it's in Illinois. We also have the NCCPI on here to get a base level as well. And then based on those CLUs that we selected, we can get a tillable soils map. And so this kind of walks us through what is currently being produced on the farm and what the difference maybe is. It's very slight, obviously, in this case, between the tillable soils and the total soils we had here at the top. And then the next one, this isn't always produced, but we can also see quickly if it's in a wetlands. And so as you're looking at this map binder, you can see we really didn't have a lot of information that we selected. We didn't need a lot of information, and it produces a really great picture of the asset at a glance. And so we can see that that ditch actually has a wetland in it. We have an energy map here, so Dave will talk about this a little bit further on, but we can see there's a transmission line by the farm. There's actually an old oil and gas well, an abandoned one. So that's great to know if we're moving forward with due diligence on the farm. Obviously, it's not producing, but good to know that it's there in case that comes up. Some satellite imagery here of the farm, and then also a regional map, the area that it's in. This one's close to Bloomington. You can see that the airport is right here, pretty close to the farm. There's some development there that we saw in the parcel data. There's a builder that owns in the area. And then the final page we have is our Farmland Insights page. And Dave will go over this later, but just has some statistics about McLean County and Illinois as a whole. And so that's a really quick map binder and how we kind of assess the data and can move forward really, really quickly with farms and go from there.
Yeah, so Emma, largely outside of maybe some of the insights data and some of the emerging information like the energy infrastructure, et cetera, this information isn't new necessarily, right? I mean, you've been working with us for a while, and largely what's been done previously is a lot of sort of disparate individual data sources. And what we're seeing now is folks are integrating these data resources in order to create really straightforward, complete and comprehensive data outcomes. And so if you take us back maybe just a few years as you've been working on these kinds of things, and this basic map binder that you showed that's fundamental to all of the work we do, how has that evolved in the context of being able to put that together and how you'd have to go about doing that?
Yeah, it's certainly changed a lot. Dave, you talked earlier about surety that was producing soil maps. So previously, we'd find a farm like this. It was a listing or, we're putting a proposal in for it. And so you'd have to get your soil maps from surety. On the map binder we produced, we had a total soils and a tillable soils. So you'd have to draw that twice in surety. And then you have to print out the individual PDFs and save them how you wanted to. And then you'd have to go to the assessor to identify the parcel and how many acres it was to make sure it was the right one. And very quickly, you could have a lot of different tabs open, somewhere 5 to 6 tabs open. The FEMA layer was something that you had to draw and draw the boundary and ask it to produce. And so that could easily take, pulling a map binder could easily take, 40 minutes depending on the asset. This one we used as an example is pretty straightforward, just 120 acres, nothing too crazy, but it could take up a serious expenditure of time, especially if you're looking at these, for 10 to 15 minutes to decide how you want to move forward with it. And then all the time that you spend into making the map binder could be feel like lost time, I guess. And so this just really improved, making it really fast. And all the data is aggregated to the one place. So, we can turn on our parcels and see the outline of the farm, and then turn on the CLUs and see which ones actually fit in the farm. And so this really helped having a single source or single truth, of a farmland asset, instead of having to individually draw each boundary. And with human error, that could have skewed the results a little bit. So we really just aggregated all of it into one place here with FarmWorth.
Yeah, and this is becoming more and more available for landowners. There's commercial systems, there's free systems that are available. The key is that all of this data to really understand where what an asset is really widely available at this point, and it's a process of making it as streamlined as possible in order to get to decisions. And one of the pieces that's really important and can be a little bit of a challenge is thinking about that comparative market analysis. And we've seen some really excellent work coming out of a couple of partner organizations, tech companies that are building out comparative analysis comp databases. Emma, can you walk through with folks our tools and how this data can now come together to pretty quickly look at an asset comparable to other sales and other things happening in the marketplace?
Sure. So we've made our map binder. We've kind of identified our subject property here. We have a list of comparable layers that we can turn on. We have our own Peoples Company comparables here. And then we also have some acres courthouse ones. These are just sourced from the courthouse, the assessor data. And then also a wide array of contributed sources here on acres. So those are usually auction results or auction comparables. And then we also have camo ag comparables in here. So land sales bulletin, Black Knight, we have a lot of different sources here, but this is our subject property. We can kind of scroll around and see here, like what this farm has sold for, the acres, the dollar per acre. This one says 19.4 thousand. What the PI value is and what the dollar per PI was. And so we can just have a really quick glance. This one sold for 19,000, and have the date in there and everything. This is a pretty recent sale. And so this, having all the comparables aggregated like this and seeing it is helpful to understand if this was a listing, if the listing was too high, or maybe it was right where we wanted it to be. See what the development is like in the area. And if we can actually click on these, and it'll take us to those comparable sales in acres. So here we have this one sold in January of this year, and it'll give you the outline. If we scroll out here, we can see that that farm that we were just looking at right here, and then just go back to our map. And so this just gives us a really quick glance of kind of what the market looks like in the area, and move forward from there based on the comparables.
Yeah, the ability to actually do these CMAs, comparable market analyses, is really important from a number of perspectives on being able to look at an asset. It's also having this data, which was fairly arduous to be able to sort through. You had to be really into farmland, paying close attention in order to build the databases, stay up to date on exactly what's happening. There's resources out there for landowners now that you can get a pretty good feel of what's happening in the marketplace pretty quickly. We've elected to partner with a few different organizations to add some additional robustness to the comparable sales that are available to us. And this is really quite impactful for us. Emma, I'd like to move to our third sort of theme now, really looking at what are the strategic opportunities around an individual asset. And we'll continue in our Insights webinar series, talking a little bit more about the renewable net zero carbon kind of story here coming up in our next session. But we do see really interesting opportunities in this energy infrastructure arena now. We've integrated in this case the ability to look at what's happening around an individual asset. Where's transmission lines? You can see substations. How far is the asset from a substation? In this particular case, you can actually see that there's a pretty substantial wind farm just to the east of the asset. This asset being close to town likely isn't necessarily a candidate for wind, but if you sort of stretch this out into a broader analysis of each individual landowner's asset or one that you might be interested in, seeing how that development's happening, where are those revenue opportunities, that's really powerful. Now you can start to think about an asset from a longer term sort of strategic view. Where can I find some additional revenue? Where are opportunities to find some upside? It's kind of interesting. We also have the oil and gas. There's an old abandoned oil well on the asset that Emma drew. If you scroll in there, probably nobody would have actually recognized that, but that's certainly one of the pieces that we can look at within these data layers. These are all publicly available data layers that we're able to pull in and educate pretty quickly. Another one that definitely comes to mind when we look at this particular asset, Emma, if you want to turn on our parcels and maybe zoom in there just a little bit closer, you can see there's some residential just to the south of the asset. And you can notice that it's actually a builder that purchased the southwest corner of this asset. And that's a pretty good signal. Hey, do we need to go look at what the zoning plan is for Bloomington, right? We can start to identify some of those opportunities with this data that's available. And these are things that landowners often don't have time to necessarily dig in deep, but having some of this information at our fingertips now can really support kind of looking forward and being strategic about the best things that we can do with our assets. So that's using our FarmWorth tool as a bit of a demonstration in order to help folks start to understand what information and data is available. How can landowners be strategic in understanding what their assets can do, what they can be? How do we maximize our revenue and our outcomes? And Emma, if we want to flip back to our slide deck, we're going to talk a little bit more now about some insights. One of the pieces that we're in process of deploying, and we have an initial deployment out at the Peoples Company website, is a toolkit that we call Farmland Insights. And if you want to flip forward, Emma, the Farmland Insights data toolkit, what we're doing is now trying to think about assets put into context with broader data sets, both spatially and temporally. So let's pull together and look at farmland values at the state, and we'll ultimately get to the county level. Let's start to understand what's happening with trends. Let's think about looking at these trends over the very long term in order to start to support our thesis and our core strategies with our assets. Then we can go through and there's some really amazing data sets. A lot of them are USDA derived, where we're looking at crop yields, where we can think about soils on an individual asset as it would relate to the county or even the state. And then one of the pieces that we're really interested in and very focused on is the crop insurance data. The actuarial data master, which is the core engine for a lot of the crop insurance data, is publicly available. It's challenging to get actually wrangled and into a data set that you can provide analysis around and start to do some analytics to understand what it means, but it's truly powerful. And we'll start to hop into that. If you want to roll forward, as you click through our maps that you saw a couple of those pictures on, you also get these long-term trends. In this case, we've lined up our I-states, Iowa, Illinois, and Indiana, also included California and Washington. And we're looking at that long-term trend by state of what farmland values are going all the way back to 1968. This gives us context. So we can go back in time and we can think about what was happening when we saw similar economic factors, similar interest rate factors. These are important resources for us, for folks to be able to quickly get their minds wrapped around what's happening with farmland. And then Emma, if you want to go forward again, we can then drill this down to individual counties. Right now, we can get more specific in understanding how an asset of interest or an asset that a particular landowner has control over compares to its county, right? In this case, we're looking at Story County, Iowa. You can see the price per acre. We've got USDA data on cash rents. We understand what the soil rating in Iowa, of course, being the corn suitability rating, second version CSR2. How does that play out? And then what are our expected yields? Now we're starting to get into analytics around that USDA data for yields, as well as pulling in crop insurance data so that we start to get predictive and understand how the analytics are driving forward what we're looking at. And let's flip to the next one. This is where we start to get into some really deep data. And Emma showed you a quick look at the Farmland Insights page that was up for the asset in McLean County, Illinois, that she looked at. We're providing context on that asset versus the average in Illinois versus the averages, the standards in McLean County. And then we get down into the risk management agency. This is the USDA agency that actually administers crop insurance. We're looking at 2022 data here. There's always a little bit of a time before some of this gets released. And we start to see really interesting outcomes, like the yield trend in McLean County is well over 2 bushels per year. If we want to understand where we're getting that appreciation of that farmland asset, it's from that yield gain, right? And the map, the county map in the upper left, is actually showing us loss ratios. So this is actuarial data from RMA on what are the loss ratios by county. And we can see McLean County sits in an area in central Illinois where it's some of the lowest loss ratios in the country. Some of the most least risky assets in the country are residing there. We start to stack these factors up, and we can quickly start to conclude where we want to put capital, where we can see that long-term appreciation, low-term risk or low risk, long-term yield increases at a very fast trend, create excellent outcomes for farmland over the long term. So this is a collection of data that is that we're providing for folks through our insights engine, and encourage people to go to the Peoples Company website. There will be more and more data resources emerging over the coming weeks within that insights toolkit that can help landowners start to understand on a comparative basis with larger spatial and temporal scales how their farmland assets are fitting within the broader environment. Let's go ahead and move forward, Emma. So when we think about what all of these data resources are doing for us, what landowners have at your fingertips now, we can really quickly and seamlessly start to get that base characterization of the assets. That means understanding all of those core mapping features like soils, soil quality, where's floodplain, the topography, and you start to work through all of those core features that give you a pretty good picture of what an asset is, and it's all right at our fingertips. This moves forward to thinking about new acquisitions, thinking about other assets that you might be interested in. That same base characterization and that crosswalk now being very, very seamless. The market analysis is really impactful, and some of the commercial groups, commercial tech products that are out there that are aggregating and sorting out those comparable sales are really streamlining the ability for landowners to understand where their assets at in the marketplace, what is value, and having that be fairly real time. There's always a little bit of a lag in some of that data coming through, but we're continuing to see updates that push that data out more and more quickly. The comparative insights that we talked about, that's really powerful in terms of understanding how yields changing, how are we growing our revenue? And that fits right into the ability to look at all of that actuarial data from crop insurance to understand our revenue guarantees and then understand our risk. And then the strategic revenue opportunities. This is getting really interesting to us in the context, certainly of the net zero conversation and the emerging renewables. We're also seeing other pathways with formalized business models around recreational opportunities, other sorts of engagement of the farmland asset class for additional revenue. We think that there's a real clear path to a significant amount of revenue, particularly in certain parts of the country that are outside of that core ag production going forward. And this digitization is creating the ability to understand that and start to take advantage of it pretty quickly. And we're also working on some emerging analyses that take us even to the next level. One piece that we'll be pulling in within our frameworks in the very near term is remote sensing, so satellite-based profit mapping. Historically, now we can actually see with some assumptions around costs of production and value of commodities, what is the profit at a subfield scale that we can start to pull right into this analysis and understanding how an asset's going to work. And then in that revenue optimization theme, these emerging markets, having this digitization is actually pushing forward and creating some transparency and some competitiveness in being able to maximize where that revenue, how we take advantage of those revenue opportunities. So very impactful over the past, certainly 20 years, even over the past 3 years, this digitization process has really accelerated. There's a lot of data available for landowners. We certainly look forward to helping folks with any needs in this arena. And then there's some really interesting things coming around the corner too that's going to even push it forward more quickly. Emma, if you want to roll forward, just a little plug. Our next Insights webinar will be May 28th. And we're going to take a deep dive into the net zero case for farmland. We're going to talk a lot about the low carbon energy transition and carbon storage in farmland. What does that really mean? Let's characterize that opportunity with the best information that we have at our fingertips. So please mark that on your calendars if you're interested in learning a little bit more about what's happening in that arena. And we'll go ahead and move to the last slide and say thanks everybody for joining, and feel free to shoot me an email at that address with any questions or follow-up. We appreciate everybody's time and look forward to joining you again on the next one. Thanks much.